patterns are a really, really fun unit to teach and a fun unit for centers. My kids always really, really love pattern centers, and I'm going to share some of my favorite ones here today with you. So if you want to know how I teach patterns, I will link a blog post and video of how I go about teaching patterns, but this is more about the different centers that I use whilst we're doing our pattern unit. So when I introduce patterns, the types of centers I use will change. So at the beginning, a lot of my centers are really recreating patterns so that kids can start to get a hang and get used to the way that patterns go, how you start to create patterns before moving on. So first we recreate patterns. The next progression or the next step is usually extending patterns. So patterns are usually started, like the root is there, and then the kids will have to look at the beginning of the pattern and finish it on their own without being able to have a reference point. So they really start there. After that, I kind of add some centers in that might be still extending patterns but have an extra component to them. So that might be a recording sheet, or it might be a different format for showing patterns, for creating patterns, for knowing which patterns to create. And finally, just free for all, create patterns. Like, here's some stuff and let's just create patterns. Let's jump right into the specifics. The first station I usually use is, like I said, a recreating. So snap cube patterns, pattern bears, connecting cubes, all of those kind of things are really, really simple. Most classrooms have some type of cube, and those are great for any kind of patterning mat. Sometimes I don't want the station, the manipulative, to be like too fun toy-like, because then it's just become a toy instead of focusing on creating the patterns. So that's why I usually start with cubes and recreating patterns. And in both of those, the patterns are completed and the kids just have to basically match them. You can cut them up into little strips or keep them as a whole paper. I usually keep them as a whole paper, and even though we're just starting to learn about patterns, it's not just AV patterns in that set. There's lots of different patterns that the kids might be recreating. And if you want an example, you can get the Snap Cube pattern mats for free in the link in the description. And like I said, after recreating, we go to extending. So some of my favorite stations for extending patterns are Unifix cube stations with empty spots, as well as bear counter stations. The kids love bears. So the bears can go for, you can use the full mat for recreating, or the mats that have their empty spaces for extending, which the kids really, really enjoy. And kind of a step up from that is spin a pattern. And in spin a pattern, you would spin your spinner, and then whatever you land on tells you the root of the pattern that you're going to create. So you would start it at the bottom and then keep it going. And it's a step up because they don't have the actual pattern that they're making on the bottom to reference. They really have to look at what the root was and then transfer that to their patterning space and complete the pattern. Similar to that is roll a pattern. So the kids would roll a pattern at whatever number they get. They will look at the key to figure out which pattern they're making, and then they will make that pattern with whatever manipulative you have that you would like them to use. And they have the option, there is an optional recording sheet, so they can actually record the patterns that they're creating, and then you can check back to see what it is that they're doing, if they're having any misconceptions or creating the patterns correctly but having trouble transferring them. Those are all things that you will be looking out for and that you might want to give them an extra support with. And last but not least, when you are creating patterns, you can really do anything, use anything, the sky's the limit. Some of my favorite things to use are beads and pipe cleaners, because that really helps their kids with their fine motor skills. You can use popsicle sticks, you can use mini erasers, you can use two-sided counters, pattern blocks, links, or those little hashtags that you get at Target. And so my kids' favorite are these like two little prong builder things that were not very expensive on Amazon. It came with a bunch of them, and the kids love those, and they were making these really cool pattern walls with them when I gave them the option. So I will leave the links to all the things that I talked about down below, and I hope you've gotten some really fun ideas of patterning centers that you can use in your classroom. I will see you next time.